Uno, via.
Hi, I'm Franco Achilli, Academic Director and Course Leader for the area of Visual Design in Raffles, Milano. I'm also a designer for identity systems, and my job is generate or rebuild the visible world of companies and their system of relationships with consumer and stakeholders. It's a complex world in which I try to organize information. This is a mission of design, following the concept of simplicity. So it is a hard job, and today we will speak about the concept of simplicity and complexity, and also to complication. I would like to start my speech today proposing a somewhat controversial image of one of my heroes. It is exactly what you see on the screen. And just a moment that I open this. It is in your screen. You can watch a big fluorescent installation that for years has welcomed staff, clients, guests in my office. This luminous light and writing is our totem. It takes up a peremptory recommendation by David Henry Thoreau that imagine you also know as one of the inspirers of Burroughs Skinner's. Burroughs Skinner has been a lecturer at Harvard from 1958 to 1974, a behavioral psychologist highly regarded in the worlds of communication design, especially in persuasive ones such as advertising. So I think it's important to remember his works. Instead, Thoreau, philosopher and writer, theorist of simple life and return to the two dimension of life and things, is the author of several books inspired to nature, simplicity, and genuine feeling for the advanced social form of civil coexistence. I love Thoreau, and I'm sure some of you also read Walden or Life in the Wood, this book, an accurate diary of his retreated experience in the forest, a life in which the meticulous annotation day by day of a simplified life, far from any inclination to the superfluous redundance, has also inspired the ecological movements and pacifist movement and those of American civil disobedience. Well, to this bright recommendation, in every sense, we applied a first and drastic reduction that you can see on the left with a red bar on the first word, simplify, because we erased this part that seemed us an unnecessary redundancy. If we are going to simplify, well, we'd better do it other way. This sign is intended to announce to our visitors what is the aim, the spirit of design, set primarily to the subtraction of superfluous, take off, with the aim of being clear, determined, direct, as simple as the famous less is more that you remember by Mies van der Rohe. Simple as a brand, service, object, or architecture, document, or message should be. I am a designer, and As a designer, I'm concerned every day to establish relationships between object, artifacts, messages, and the community that must use or receive them, reprocess them in a useful and understandable way. But today, I'm not here to tell you about my diary job. In the complex reality in which we live, it is not always easy to act with objects or signs because we risk increasing the degree of confusion and disorder that does not help us to live better. I'm sure that while you look around every day, you feel more than once a sense of uneasiness for the endless aggression of images, signals, objects that crowd our space and our life. And our minds, and consequently our behavior, especially in this emergency context in which we are living due to the pandemic. We have contradictory information, overproduction of messages, fluctuating behaviors, confused data. The aim of design should be to raise standards of quality of human existence, improving human condition and making life as simple, pleasant, and understandable as possible. The highest goal should therefore to be make sense of the designer's actions by worrying about the actual usefulness of his artifacts. In these frameworks, I will try today to consider the controversial but fascinating relationship between simplicity and complexity, and the implication of the multiform discipline of design and the framework of human behavior. Well, but first, I need to talk to you about this machine. The name is MFCJ4510DW. It's not the name of a Star Wars character. It's just the name of one of the many printers that I passed through my house. Or rather, the most complicated, not complex, complicated print that I ever bought. I started preparing this speech by remembering how I abandoned, desolated and frustrated yet another attempt to connect a multifunctional printer to the home computer, laptops, and other devices with the goal of launching prints, scanning images, connecting to the network, and doing many other things that I presumably won't need anymore. Even just for age, I'm not a nerd, of course, and considering myself not properly evolved, one day I turned to an Apple store to get advice on a good printer of a plug-and-play solution, just to avoid spending hours and hours of hard work on manuals and for downloading complicated softwares and drivers for multifaceted arsenal of home software. I promised my son, sparkling, that this time I will solve all the problems in one fell swoop, and that their sarcastic smiles will crush them in a quarter of an hour. I'm not afraid of technology, but given my age, I'm terrified of instruction manuals. No more manuals, no driver, no platform. The dealer assured me that all I had to do in that afternoon was connect the printer to my home network and everything will work beautiful. There was the logic of my simplify that I saw in my guest faces every day. One client, one day, I remember, she illuminated me with a perfect statement to give the idea of the digital connection and the internet. It must be like water. I open the tap and and she comes out. A wonderful metaphor. At last, my MFC J4510DW really represented what I had been longing for. I had in my hands a complex, medium expensive, but this time it was certainly worth it, and a simple instrument. A machine capable of dialoguing with the human being and our different domestic devices. He was faced with a mountain of complexity enclosed in a cardboard box which would ask for nothing more than a bit of power, and that I had and have, an active Wi-Fi. There was and there is that too, but it turned out to be far from simple and complex. It was damn complicated. Here it is. I show you again the object of our desperation. The instruction manual, for example, included in the box, was 202 pages long. But first, there was a quick installation guide of 44 pages plus other minor safety manuals. When I listened through it, I realized that none of the promises of simplicity I had received was true. The case of the MFC and blah blah blah, however, has become the useful paradigm to address my speech today, and already the name of the printer should have made me suspicious. Why call a machine which such a complicated identification name or similar to 30 other models of the same brand? Here I have to give my appreciation to IKEA that the invention of generating naming from the names of existing Scandinavian geographical expressions, such as lakes and rivers and mountains, is much simpler and more poetic, even if the products are called Doppa, Dragan, Ore, or Jangsho, or Lixelovas. And for your information, Jangsho is a clamp lamp, and Lixelovas is the name of sofa bag. The big problem, why it's so hard to come up with simple things? I mean, why can't the things always just be only simple? Answer, because life is instead extremely complex, and after all, a complex universe is the one in which it is easier for us to survive. We can try to simplify objects, concepts, description, and signals, but we are so attracted to the complexity of the world because it actually represents the state of things, the whole environment of social environment in which we live and in which we can adapt with difficulty or without making too much of it. And complexity, there is a various level, even when we least expect it, under the uniform eyes of the poor. Or you can find complexity inside the square meter in the middle. Each of us, even individually, is an extraordinary concentration of complexity, simplified by different levels of reading and interpretation. Let's try to get an idea by watching just 1 minute of this beautiful movie by Charles Inn, one of the most influential and important designers of the last century, designed to explain it to the concept so complex about the elevation to power. The title of the film is Power to 10, is from 1968, and I think it's a wonderful example of how you can make a thing.
10 to the 0 power. Now we reduce the distance to our final destination by 90% every 10 seconds, each step much smaller than the one before. At 10 to the minus a tiny blood vessel within. Skin layers vanish in turn. An outer layer of cells, felty collagen. The capillary, containing red blood cells and a roughly lymphocyte. We enter the white cell. Among its vital organelles, the porous wall of the cell nucleus appears. The nucleus will...
Well, of course, the film is longer, and I suggest to you to watch it soon because it's wonderful. The object that every day I carry around on my bag or that I find on my desk are familiar and simple, or I think are simple, even if they are inserted in a very complex universe, my universe. I know them well. I use them almost always correctly. I've learned how they work and not only their function. I usually choose them also according to their aesthetic formal expression. Together, they compose more partial complex universe, but they are also simple tools because they seem simple to me and I can use nonchalantly. Each of them is instead full of complexity. For example, my moleskin, this one, fills every day with connection and notes, which are enriched with sketches and explanations, appointments, creative ideas, addresses that guide and drives my existence. And it becomes the external memory of everything that binds me to the world. A very simple object capable of supporting me in very complex activity. What we hate are the complicated objects, like my former print, NFC, and blah, 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 but not the value or ontological aspect of their being complex entities. My Mac is a very sophisticated object. We all recognize its value, but aesthetically it communicates an appearance of simplicity and utility, a wonderful ambivalence, exactly as moleskin. It disguises its complexity with a disenchanted simplicity. I deal with this theme here as a designer because I have to commit myself every day to give back, for example, the complexity of a company through the essentiality of its brand, to communicate the flavors and the process of preparation of a food or wine with the packaging. Design works on different levels of the services of an entity. For an airline, by declining its visual identity on financial performances of a banking of industrial groups through the creation of data visualization in annual report. Design is therefore everywhere, exactly since man tried to organize his life on this planet. This is the cave of Lascaux, where we found the first tales of life in the prehistoric age. People tried to communicate through images their episode of life for remember to the others what happened in their life. The complexity or the transmission of the perception of the concept is useful to make us understand the value of the things, their state and their balance with the world around them. After all, complexity invites us to perceive in every moment the potential meaning of the things, the connection between us and the different entities, just as we marvel at and are attracted to the complex form of nature because we discover its meaning and deep magic. the wonderful fractal design of the cauliflowers, the Roman cauliflowers, and is our danger today, but this is a wonderful shape of coronavirus. Well, we try to observe our planet. When we observe our planet from space, we see a simple form, a solitary sphere. The closer we get to it, the more we realize that the extraordinary complexity it is made up of. To talk about Earth or the birth of universe, we can certainly not describe chain by chain all the docufilm that have been able to capture nature, human ingenuity, organized and spontaneous form of life. We need a simplified and identifiable expression. The Earth appears at different distances, different, but always remains itself. However, its complexity can be simplified for different levels of understanding. Design is a fundamental activity to help us manage complexity because it drives us in understanding what is around us and allows us to grasp its meaning. The use of design and its product reworks and enriches human behavior. It helps us understand it and make it better. You remember how 9,000 objects from those of our cinematic background, such as the complex onboard computer of the spaceship Discovery 1 from the fantastic movie by Stanley Kubrick, Space Odyssey, the one of the man's most extraordinary inventions, such as the officer paperclip design, and without the knowledge of each other by valor and faith. This is a fantastic. I love so much this object. So simple, just a still rule forward for give a function. Object with their intrinsic ontological potential, influence, and they stay with us on our evolution. And you know that design considered not only exceptional inventions that have transformed the world, but also humble and traditional artifacts, such as bread, chair, frying pan, pencil, credit card, car, pen, the bread and the pen, for example, and for example the maps for orient and give us the correct indication and orientation when we are in a subway or in the city. This is a map designed by Massimo Vignelli, one of the most famous designers of the history of design. If we understand the reasons expressed by a complex environment, we do not fear it, but we become capable of facing it with a special serenity provided by awareness. If I don't understand why connecting a printer must be so damn complicated, I can't fully appreciate the value of all its many functions, to consider the effort of the engineers who designed it and maybe even accept the brand differential expressed by its premium price. Instead, I just want to give it a hammering, this one, and give us the commitment to solve the mutual hostility that we have established with the printer. My haiku, the Japanese word that defines a person's sense of affection for one of these artifacts, dissolves itself at this point. The brand with which that item is branded may or may not have a strong reputation, but I'm willing to question it until I get rid of it finally. Because I feel like looking for another printer. And it's quite easy to hate a brand without thinking about its it too much or blaming yourself for accepting too lightly a piece of advice received. Why? Because I'm looking for simplicity at all costs in an extremely complex object, and I can't do it because I probably don't understand. It is above all a mental condition which someone else manages to resolve brilliantly and which others, on the other hand, do not even face. Simplicity, however, doesn't not mean trivialize. It means establishing a level of direct interaction that can be faced with one's own conception of complexity. When things are too simple, we want them a little more complex underneath because we think they are otherwise boring. Think about your smartphone, exactly what's in your pocket. It's an instrument with extreme multifunctionality, all concentrated in few square centimeters and with a formidable computing capacity. Whether you have chosen it yourself or it has been given to you, you will certainly appreciate it as there's a thousand options declared. And perhaps you will still do not know them all. How many of that function do you usually use? Will the simplified smartphone really be just as interesting for the same price if it was equipped with only those 4 or 5 functions that you use frequently during the day: email, browser, phone, and some messaging apps? I don't think so. We will demand a lot of other functions just because we are constantly looking for more complexity, even though we are not always able to handle it fully, because the price must justify the complexity of the product, or not. It's time for a coffee. Let's take the machine case to make it good and then go back to industrial design. Italian design has given us perhaps one of the most beautiful objects ever made in the world. This is Mocha Bialetti. Mocha Bialetti was born as a simple object, perfect to face a complex and delicate processes, producing one or more cups of coffee, enhancing its aroma. And its design confirmed the modernist dogma that form always follows function. In short, it is an almost perfect object because it is rooted without difficulties inside our habits, inside our behaviors. It is a timeless object, a fundamental virtue of good design. It's composed by only 5 pieces: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It is easy to use, even without ever having read the instruction. Who ever read the instruction for the use of Mocha Bialetti? Come on. You can find 3 cups machine in the shop for about 20 euros. Not bad for keeping life in your apartment with excellent design. And to make coffee the best way in the world, 20 euros. Yet, today many coffee consumers, especially in the USA, are fascinated by the new coffee makers, where not only the objects and the number of pieces they consist of are complex and complicated and expensive, but also the process is difficult and redundant. Look, many trendy American coffee bars attract their customers with extremely laborious production and service processes. The medium of production exhibited and showed meets another category of consumers' need, the pre-consumer aesthetic experience, and falls when it doesn't change directly into styling, I think the styling is the most negative trait of design, in my opinion. The Bialetti Mocha is pure design, resolving and functional, while the Royal Coffee Maker coffee machine you see here is cumbersome and complicated. Even in its performance, provides a new experience and satisfies the consumer's sense of wonder. The consumer is satisfied while waiting for product and absorbing the service. The Royal Coffee Maker machine, let's be clear, is not from the 19th century or 18th century, but from this century, and it costs more than $2,000. We continue to prefer complex atmospheres and processes, although we know that simplicity will be more comfortable and understandable. We are attracted basically by the conceptual model that seem to us more appropriate to our lifestyle. But we also reluctantly face learning difficult processes when we are willing to recognize that we can improve our knowledge and performance. We face very complex physical efforts and rules of the game when a sport interests us. We are willing to invest a significant portion of our lifetime to attend courses in which we have to study or train hard to get the final satisfaction, that of living a memorable and persistent experience, often formative and preparatory for a new personal emancipation. Look, when the first computers will simplify the interfaces appeared, nobody complained about the new iconic language being introduced. The idea of storing files in an archive folder icon or destroying them by moving them to a recycling bin icon was universally liked, because that design was and still is an excellent example of good conceptualization. That easy, it's simple. An example of a conceptualization that, simplifying the use, made a comprehensible and otherwise extremely complex process to represent. Files, in fact, don't exist as atomic artifacts to be stored somewhere in the physical world, but the conceptualization in the form of an icon, which looks identical to that of a traditional file folder, give them a legitimate rag of existence, put them back in the immaterial space, but it managed very well to make us understand how we can use them, retrieve them or throw them away if they were material. Let's take a step back in time and talk about a pioneer of simplicity. This type of simplification, the result of very complex cognitive analysis, was used by Otto Neurath and Gerd Hans in Austria, in Vienna. With the introduction of the isotype pictogram system, the forerunner of all the pictogram signaling system we still use today in airport science and wayfinding systems. Neurath proposed, it was 1925, to simplify the complex and hostile information chaos linked to the economic and social data of his time. It was driven by the noble mission of offering basic immediate access tools necessary to increase the understanding of the life of his time and the socio-economic phenomena that influenced it. An alphabet of science was invented, capable of returning very complex data and information. At the origin almost of a modern guidance system, we find the masterful work of Neurath and Arms, and we must be grateful to them if today we are able effortlessly to simplify a lot of information and make it accessible to different cultures. The Isotype project was one of the first major simplification projects where design has been able to open society to knowledge and sharing to the idea of inclusive service Today, the symbol of emergency exit, toilet or parking are details of the visual system understandable to different classes and social cultural categories. We find them in airports, in stations, in road signs, in places where we need everyone to understand us immediately. As human beings, we generally seek information, instruction, explanation, orientation. We do this because we are, except for some discouraging cases around the world, sociable beings, and we want to establish continuous relationships between us and the brands, between us and the objects and places. We look for translation or explanation for the facts that happen around us, for the object or behavior we surround ourselves with. Information silence or bad signposting increases discomfort, danger, tension among human beings. When the nightmare, I don't know where to go, slips into our minds, we look for a simplified scene. We don't need complicated information to decipher. We need information not only to find a toilet in an airport or resolve a taxes discussion, but also to go somewhere, take a medication, or simply make sense of our experience. So, what makes something simple or complex? Donald Norman, the brilliant author of many books on design and complexity, explained to us that it's important to have a good conceptual model of how something works. Design helps us, through its theory and practices, to return a conceptual model of how objects and services work. When we consider models adequate, everything seems simple to us. For an astronaut, the control console of the spacecraft is an accessible instrument. The layout of the controls and the hundreds of information on the displays are not all complicated things as they would appear to us. They are things that he knows and uses effortlessly and that he considers compatible with the function related to his professional work. For us, on the other hand, that panel is a jungle of impossible objects and functions. And since we are not astronauts, we consider the interface of the part of the world that works up there in space too complicated. Because without knowledge, everything is obviously and damnably unapproachable. Try to compare the control panel of the shuttle with the Elon Musk's new spaceship, the DRAGAN. Everything is extremely simplified compared to the flight only a few years ago. That interior touchscreen makes the controls of the amazing machine appear very close to our iPad. Have we become similar, us and the astronauts? Everything may have become simpler in the space, but on the Earth, most things look damn complicated. Yet each one of you, everyone sitting here in front of your monitor, is attracted by the complex world that every day gives meaning to your life. You are not scared by the congestion of the city, and when you start traveling again, you will not even fear the long time at the immigration desk and in international airport. You know perfectly well why those phenomena are happening in which you are involved, such as traffic delays or passenger identification. Information simplifies things for us and change the state of tension. Is there anything more hateful than waiting for information about the delay of your plane or not receiving it? Or staying in the hospital, in the ER, without having a clue when those with your number will call? Is it so hard to know what happened through that door to get to blocking the queue for hours? If we knew that a very serious case arrived in ER, we would understand the situation, and we could even sympathize with sympathize with those who are fighting for their life and with the hospital staff. Often the triage monitor in the ER is not updated and we are kept in the dark. And to think that all we ask in return is a little information, poor, cheap merchandise. You are a commuter today, and your train to the university or office stops like it does every day in the middle of the fields and sheds of the suburbs. Nobody tells to you anything for half an hour. Your experience as a service consumer crumbles, and your predisposition to listen to the other reasons goes up more. The design of services began to deal with these things, organizing processes, relationships, respecting the needs of social coexistence and behavior. Like a real project, it's one of information and relationships. Simple experiences can become complex and vice versa, but we always need information and adequate conceptual model. If we are aware of it and recognize ourselves in it, we are able to accept it even when it is against us, even attributing value to the situation, often even when it is a negative experience. Lives are therefore so complex that even products and systems are so complex. The designer's job is to make the world a little simpler. And simplifying means enriching our lives with experience, with practicality, freeing up time, not to impoverish them. Sorry. Designing service is a less spectacular activity because often there is nothing to see or show, but only to perceive. But if the service are well designed and communicated, they help to improve people's lives. And so I propose to you, in conclusion, to address a phenomenon that is frequent and for many people unbearable. Psychology of the queue. When we are online, neat or compulsive, it really bothers us to spend time, waste it. Whether on the street, in front of the desk, or even at phone when we urgently seek someone's assistance, we are hardly ever willing to tolerate the waste of time involved in a wait that we consider inexplicable. We believe that they should only listen to us. What the hell is there to do? We only tolerate the expectation that we understand. A few seconds to see that hot water from the bathroom tap appears, we ideally follow with the thoughts the path of hot water from the boiler in the kitchen to the bathroom sink. The download of the WeTransfer when the progress turns fast and signals that everything is progressing smoothly and we are reaching the finish line. We don't tolerate wasting time beyond what we believe is right to accord to the current trial. Time seems to slow down when we do something boring, the same, simply useless. If we are in a queue on the motorway, we try to change lanes to make diversion, to challenge the time and waiting. Its service becomes fluid and we manage to establish a direct relationship with the process. Time seems to come back to life and flow faster. An elevator that signals that progressive reaching of the floors appears to us faster than an elevator that does not the same. Yet they travel at the same speed, but one seems faster and more efficient than the other because it simplifies its function just the way we like it. Often, however, standing in line and waiting is fundamental for our well-being. For example, when we wait for the green light at the traffic light to cross the road. But even here, Very often we can't resist, and the waiting becomes intolerable. Think about it, intolerable. For cyclists who don't want to use the brakes at the traffic light, the red light doesn't exist. Cyclists and pedestrians often cross the same. Waiting is unbearable, even though lately the pandemic has forced us to reconsider. Waiting was so unbearable, but most people had nothing else to do in those days. They appeared to jump the queue. Waiting without apparent motivation is unbearable, and when we don't understand why we are breaking the rule imposed, seeking simplicity at all costs, and even agreeing to break conventions, we go through a red light, and some people risk their lives sometimes. I leave you, after my too much talk about the relationship between simplicity and complexity, with a video that shows, in my opinion, how creativity and design can give relevant cultural turns and obtain practical results on people behavior. Because, after all, it is a matter of adapting to conceptual models. And this was particularly successful because the important thing is to share and involve people in the experience.
People are born to live their lives. I'm born to dance. Want me to work like a dog in a full-time job? Haha, I'm born to dance. Don't wear no coat, no tie, no shirt, and even no pants. I'm born to dance. You shaking your head? Well, I'll be shaking my ass, cause I'm born to dance. I wanna shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, girl. Do you wanna shake it? I wanna shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it, go. Watch me dance now.
Well, what you have just seen was a recent initiative of the car brand Smart, aimed at educating citizens to respect civilly the traffic lights, times, and accept the idea of waiting. Successful experiment in Lisbon, especially with an audience known for their low tolerance for waiting at traffic lights. 81% of the people who had to cross the street waited for the green light, having fun and creative design successfully, and managed to give a meaning and concrete response to the waiting time. Okay, now non mi trovo più. Qua. So I have come to end, and I want to thank you for waiting so patiently for the end of this Raffle talk. Thank you very much. I don't know if there are some questions. No questions. Okay. So thank you very much to all, and hello from Milano, from our headquarters. We are closed till for the pandemic, but we are going better in Milano, and we are waiting for you in the next months in our school. Thank you very much. Bye.